Hello and welcome. My name is Ashy and this is a poem presentation on Robert Frost's Desert Places. Let us begin with a read-through and then a stanza-by-stanza breakdown. Snow falling and night falling fast, oh fast, in a field I looked into going past, and the ground almost covered smooth in snow, but a few weeds and stubble showing last. The woods around it have it is theirs. All the animals are smothered in their lairs. I am too absent-spirited to count. The loneliness includes me unawares. And lonely as it is, that loneliness will be more lonely ere it will be less. A blanker whiteness of benighted snow with no expression, nothing to express. They cannot scare me with their empty spaces between stars, on stars where no human race is. I have it in me so much nearer home to scare myself with my own desert places. Now that we've read the poem, let's dig into the stanzas. The poem opens with our speaker outside as snow and darkness fall very quickly. The landscape before them has been blanketed with snow, with only the tops of the grass and weeds still poking through. Though the speaker is looking into this field, they know the snow is all around in the woods beyond. All the snow has effectively barricaded the animals in their dens, almost as if trapping them. The speaker is not like those animals in their lairs. Rather, the speaker is the lone witness to the stifled landscape. For this, they feel the first pangs of loneliness as they realize their absent spirit is just as lonely as the landscape and becomes a part of it. The speaker becomes somewhat overwhelmed as they dwell on this sense of loneliness, knowing that it will only get worse before it gets better. So too, the snow will continue to pile up, becoming a more solid and encompassing swath of white. Rather than an excess of beauty, the speaker sees only the erasure of the landscape, feels only the absence. In the final stanza, the speaker's thoughts turn outward, beyond themselves, the field, and into the far reaches of space. Each has their own empty spaces, implying the loneliness the speaker feels exists everywhere in the universe. The poem concludes with the speaker determining that the desert places within themselves are more than sufficient to cause crushing loneliness. As with many of Frost's poems, Desert Places follows an AA-BA rhyme scheme and features 10-syllable lines. Elsewhere in the poem, though, are many crafty uses of poetic literary devices. One such example includes his use of repetition of words and phrases. In the first stanza, when he repeats both falling and fast, it piles up the language as the snow and nighttime do, while also speeding up the reading of the line to mimic the speed with which they fall. In the third stanza, the repeated use of lonely and its expanded form of loneliness literally and visually demonstrate the anticipated expansion and dissipation of the feeling for the speaker. Also in the third stanza, the repeated mention of a lack of expression emphasizes the nothingness the speaker sees in the landscape, almost approaching existential dread. Frost is certain to sprinkle subtle musicality throughout the poem well beyond its rhyme scheme. In this first example, from the second stanza, the soft A sound of ah puffs out like breath in the cold. The pensive N sounds in the third stanza repeat, producing an almost nihilistic effect as the speaker considers the scene as it relates to their state of mind. And the repeating S sounds of the fourth stanza emphasize the fright and gravity of the intense loneliness. Next, I think it's worth noting the particular words Frost chooses to include in this brief, poignant poem. His use of the word smothered in the second stanza distinctly sets the tone for the rest of the poem. This is not like stopping by the woods on a snowy evening. This poem describes a darker moment, a darker scene that causes the speaker dread rather than delight. Here the snow is smothering. The next notable word choice is in the third stanza's use of benighted, which, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, means both, quote, overtaken by darkness or night, end quote, which suits the poem's setting, as well as, quote, existing in a state of intellectual, moral, or social darkness, unenlightened, end quote. By using this word, Frost illustrates the lack of meaning in the empty landscape, how coldly and unfeeling the snow is as it snuffs its features. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, Frost's inclusion of the title word desert is notable as it does not describe a typical desert landscape void of precipitation. Rather, it invokes a sense of desertion, a void in general, a void of meaning and connection. The careful application of these literary devices illuminates the themes and tones of this poem. By no means have I covered everything in this poem. Like the stubbly grass beneath the snow, there's more going on underneath. At this point, I invite you to consider other aspects of this poem with me. Here I have just a couple of places to start. For example, whom might the they of stanza 4 be? What might the it be in stanza 2? And what makes you think so? Elsewhere, there's the question of, was there ever a time when you saw a landscape that made you feel lonely? Describe that landscape and that feeling. Thank you so much for joining me for this presentation.